Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. So today we're checking out another product from Eufy. This is their 4G LTE cam S330. So this is a new LTE and 4G compatible camera that they've actually released. It is 4K and it does come with its own solar panel. The solar panel for this particular camera is mounted separately, so it does come with its own mount, and the camera itself has a ring light around the actual camera. Here you can see it does actually come with a pack, so you will need to actually sign up for whatever SIM package that you want to actually make use of, but it does come with the SIM card included. And then depending on what country you're in and what companies you have available to you, you can sign up for different data packages. And this camera is actually set up in such a way where it actually tries to minimize the actual data usage, and it has a lot of other things built in that enable it to save on the data that you're actually using if you do choose to go by the 4G LTE route. Here you can see everything that actually comes with it. So this one is slightly different to the ones that I've had before, because that wall mount bracket, it kind of just pushes on, but it does actually come with that strap, and that strap is a pole mount. So if you wanted to, you could literally just mount this to any pole or gutter or anything around that you can actually get that around. It does come with a 32GB memory card included, so here you can see that, and the memory card actually installs on the front, I believe, so you have to, or the back of the camera, so you push the camera lens all the way down and then it'll actually reveal the memory card slot. The SIM card goes on the back, so here you can see the actual package that you get if you purchase this in the UK. If you get it anywhere abroad, you might receive a different package. Here you can see the front of the camera, so you do get a little LED on the front of the camera, as well as some sort of small cutouts for the actual speaker. The camera itself is 4K and is surrounded by a ring LED. Now these in my testing have not been the brightest. On the side of the camera you get some minimal branding from Eufy, so you do get Eufy security and then the 4K markation, so you know it is a 4K camera. On the back of the camera you have your sync button. Above that you have your antenna, and we'll talk about this a little later. You have a USB-C port for power, and as well as the solar panel as well, and then you have the port for the actual nano SIM card. Once again, you can see the actual USB-C and where you insert the SIM card on the back of the camera, and just above that you can see where the mount actually clips on. The antenna connection for this particular camera is not included. It's not something that Eufy is actually producing or selling at the moment, and possibly that's something that they might release in the future, but at this moment in time it's not actually made use of. You may be able to find a third-party one, so if you have bad reception where you are, you can connect that and make use of it, but that's not something that's being utilized at the moment. Okay, so now we'll take a look at the setup in the app, which you want to do inside before you actually go outside and install this, and then once it's installed we'll go through some test footage of what it actually looks like. Okay, so let's take a look at the S330's settings. So firstly, right at the top, I do have this connected via my home base. So rather than storing on the internal memory card, it is saving to my home base. This is a choice for you if you want to actually do this or not. You can have it completely independent, but I prefer to have everything linked into the home base because it does give you a little bit of extra functionality with the AI tracking. So that's something that you won't get if it's not connected to the home base. Next to that, you have the motion detection settings. This is all pretty standard. So obviously the bottom three in the sort of device detection type, these are all dependent on your usage. So if you do have pets and stuff like that, or if you want to ignore all of those kind of detections. Vehicle detection for where I've got it located in my back garden, that's not really relevant. So human detection and basically the AI powered one is the only thing that I really have enabled. I do have AI tracking enabled. I believe if you don't have it connected to the home base, then I don't think that option will probably show up. Detection sensitivity you can choose. Whenever you're setting these kind of cameras up, it's always best to have them so then you're slightly diagonal rather than straight onto any areas where subjects might approach. That way it cuts across the beam of detection and it'll improve your chances of actually picking up detections correctly. Next to that, you have the pan and tilt settings. So this is where you set up your camera and you can set basically presets for what you want to see, what you don't want to see, that kind of thing. So by default, it'll always go back to your #1 position, and then the other ones you can kind of choose to quickly switch to certain locations. Night vision. So with this particular one, you have the option of turning off the LEDs. You have color night vision and black and white night vision. Now, most of the areas around my property have decent lighting, so I actually always leave all my cameras on color night vision. If the area where you're mounting this particular camera doesn't have good lighting, then you might be better off with the black and white night vision because it'll detect subjects further back. Whereas, as I said, because most areas areas where I've got cameras located, I also have additional lighting, so because of that it always picks up subjects quite well, so you get more detail out of the color and night vision in my opinion for my setup. Power Manager is basically all of your power management statistics as well as giving you information in terms of what's going on. Now I don't currently have the solar panel connected to this particular one. If I did, obviously we'd be able to see what sort of charge it's getting, but from previous track history with anything mounted in my rear garden, generally whatever's there, even under heavy usage, it can always maintain 100% charge. So you do have these two sections here where you can kind of switch between them and see how much energy is being used and how much is being retrieved via the solar panel. If you do have the solar panel connected, then you also want to make sure you've got it set to that. Now one thing I did notice about this particular one is all of these defaults, normally this middle one is 60 seconds. On this particular camera it's actually reduced down to 20. Even your customized ones, I believe normally these ones can be up to 120 and this one's limited to 60. So it's almost as though they know that this particular camera is probably not going to be either used in the same way where you've got a lot of prolonged action. Maybe this is located somewhere further away, but also they're probably mindful of the actual battery inside it, and because of that they want to actually restrict how long clips are recorded for. Below that you have your video settings, so this is where if you want your watermark on or not. Now this is something where previously it would give you an option to have date and time and separate the Eufy logo. On this one for some reason it almost looks as though they've combined it, so I'll have to check that in a little while. Streaming quality, you can set this to whatever you want. I normally just leave this on auto because as soon as it gets a good connection it'll take you up to 4K anyway, whereas if you have it set to 4K all the time then sometimes you won't actually connect very well initially. Recording quality, I always leave this in 4K. And then privacy zones, if you want to go in and set up any privacy zones. Now with previous cameras, whenever I've tried to do this, it doesn't work with motion zones. So for example, if I add a privacy zone here, then sometimes what would happen is this wouldn't actually work when it's actually using the pan and tilt function. So I'll have to wait and see whether this particular camera has been updated for that to work alongside motion detection and motion zones where your presets. Coming into your auto settings, so I always leave these on high by the chance that you actually use the intercom that's built in. You want to be able to hear everything quite loudly. I do leave it to record audio because obviously that is useful. This obviously all of this stuff is separated out because it probably does use more battery. So if you've got it in a location where you're not bothered about audio, then you could probably disable this and save on battery life a little. Notifications, this is up to you. I always leave this on full effect, and what it does is it sends through a quick notification first and then it will send through maybe a snapshot thereafter. If you want just the fastest, then obviously you've got the other options. So the top one is most efficient, so obviously that you get a notification without any sort of included photos, and the bottom one is where you're getting everything in one, so that will be a better quality notification because it gives you more information, but obviously it's slightly delayed because it's having to combine all that information rather than just sending you a quick notification initially that then updates with the actual photo snapshot. And at the bottom you do have your tone for whatever you wish to use. Under general you do have a few more settings, so you have the status LED. I always disable these on all my cameras because it's just additional power that you're making use of. Storage, because I have it linked to Homebase 3, it will show up there. If you don't have it linked to Homebase 3, then it'll be using whatever built-in memory you have. Then obviously they do also have this cloud storage as well, even though they have it spelt wrong on that particular screen. You do have the mounting guide just below that where it'll give you some information in terms of how to actually get everything set up again. So if you didn't want to read through the manual, you can just use these quick start guides kind of thing. And then about devices, all the information about the actual device itself. Always check for firmware whilst you're indoors, that way you're not having to do firmware updates over a weaker connection. Share device is if you do have additional people on your home setup for Eufy, you can add this to their homepage, so you can set everything up and then you can just share it with other people and it'll show up for them as well. And then the bottom one is some feedback, so being able to contact Eufy and either highlight issues or just give some general feedback. Okay, and as expected, when you're using the privacy zones, as you can see just here, it does disable your pan and tilt at the bottom. If you're using any privacy zones, it kind of makes this a stationary camera. Okay, so one final thing, this is a 4G LTE camera, so if you did want to actually make use of the 4G functionality and not use it the way I'm using it through the home base, then I don't see any option where you can just switch it. The only way you'd be able to do that is to fully reset the camera and actually set it up from scratch. So basically you'd have to remove it from your Eufy home, reset the camera, go through the sync process again, and then set it up from scratch. It doesn't have a functionality right now where you can switch from 4G LTE mode to Wi-Fi, or even use the 4G LTE as a backup just in case the Wi-Fi and your home base were to drop out and have some sort of an issue. So that's something where I think they're missing out on at the moment, where the whole point of 4G, as with mobile phones, is that it's backup. So where you have Wi-Fi, you make use of the Wi-Fi, and if that were to ever drop out, then you have that backup of the 4G LTE available to you there. That's something that obviously right now they're not really utilizing fully. It's something that I'm sure they could probably fix with a firmware update somewhere down the line, but right now they don't have that functionality available. Okay, so let's just quickly run through the setup again. We'll try and set it up with 4G this time.
Connecting to the network. Please wait.
Okay, and this is where if you'd registered the actual SIM card with one of the UK providers, then this is where it would actually be connecting. I don't think this is going to actually connect because I've not actually done anything with the SIM card. Functionality wise, it's going to be exactly the same anyway. Okay, so coming on to the actual video sample. So this is when I first installed it. So this is where I was just getting it set up. So where I've got it installed, I've currently got it installed roughly about just above the door height for my kitchen. So it's not overly high. One thing I would suggest with these types of cameras is that you need to be 3 meters or higher ideally. This is probably about 2.5 meters from the ground at the moment, so it's not at the ideal height, so it doesn't actually give you the full reach in terms of going up, but going down and panning sideways and everything, that's all fine. This is now a little later in the day and we'll be coming on to a night clip in just a moment. So here we can see the actual effect of that ring LED. As I say, I've tested quite a few different variants of Eufy cameras. I've got the floodlight cameras, which obviously light up a lot more area. To me, this is not very powerful in terms of how much it actually lights up. The camera's actually picking up quite a lot of light. You can see it's 9 p.m. at night and it doesn't look fully dark in these clips, even though in March at that time it would have been pitch black outside. So you can see it is actually picking up quite a bit of light on its own, and then the built-in light is lighting up somewhat area. It's only within, I'd say, maybe 5 to 10 meter range where it's actually lighting up, and it's not the best coverage either. So it's doing an okay job. Obviously the caveat is in this area, if somebody was to approach, then they'd be lit up by a load of other lights. So it's not really a big problem for me, but if need be, you could actually switch it to black and white instead. Okay, so coming on to one of the sort of issues that all of Eufy's pan and tilt cameras tend to have is whenever they're tracking any motion, the jerkiness of the actual camera movement, it can basically blur out the actual image and make what should be a very clear image blurry at times. So when a subject's actually moving, it tends to follow very aggressively, and that actually makes the image blurrier than it need be. Remember, this is only recording at 15 FPS, which is another weak point of Eufy system. Okay, and finally coming on to a few shots showing the actual mount. Now, one thing on the actual mount I just need to make very clear is wherever you mount this, make sure it's out of reach, because that mount, you can just push 2 buttons on the sides and unclip it. Wherever you've installed this, make sure people can't get access to it. The actual pole mount, as you can see from this setup here, this was just a temporary setup for me because I just wanted to get it set up and actually test it. But it is actually quite useful, and it's a lot more secure than I thought it would be. It doesn't ratchet on as tight as maybe I would have hoped, but because it's kind of the weight is pulling down on it, it's not going anywhere. That stayed there for a number of days when I was actually testing it without any issues. So the actual mounting system, even though it seems strange, it does actually work. Coming on to the actual camera and my sort of final thoughts and review, it's kind of a strange one. So I'm not really sure what the purpose of this camera is. I don't think here in the UK it's really of any use to anybody. I don't think you would be mounting this in any place where, unless you have a very, very large property where you're not going to be getting Wi-Fi range. So even right to the back of my property, I still get Wi-Fi range. So I don't see the point of having 4G for it, especially considering it doesn't utilize the setup in the same way as I would, which is use the 4G as a backup. Yes, if you want to keep it as an independent 4G connection, you can do that. And I understand why they would advertise it like that. So then you can install this somewhere where you get 0 Wi-Fi. But when you have that functionality where you can use that 4G as a backup, then why not make use of it? The other thing is the actual specs and everything of it. Because they've set this up for 4G and LTE, they've kind of limited everything on it. So it's actually not giving you the best of what it can do, because it's limiting the clips, it's limiting the data, and it's limiting the frame rate. Overall, it works, it does what it's meant to do, but personally, I would not be using this. It'll be going back in the box and probably given away to a family member. Anyway, if you have benefited from this video, I'd appreciate if you can give this video a thumbs up and also subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. I do have a few other Eufy products in the pipeline that I am testing, so stay tuned for those. And until the next one, thanks very much for watching.